They what? Oh, which, the vice or the? Oh, in the kitchen still.
Broadcasting.
Zoom broadcasting.
Why don't you do tonight a video though?
What, before?
So there was no mission involved.
Well, today, everything, I make sure everything is video. It doesn't have to be live, but you record for sure, push the shot, because later you can show it. I'm not saying for me, for the Mahad the metal, you know?
I mean, I put a pistol there.
Fine, good. Okay, l'chaim, everyone, l'chaim. The Rebbe Marash was nostalgic. He passed away. Maybe that's not the right expression, as we'll see from the story. And Tov Reish Mem Gimmel Yud Gimmel Tishrei, 13th of Tishrei in the year 1882. And then those days there were no phones, and there was definitely not social media and no internet. So news took a while till it spread. So in the town of Lubavitch, they knew the sad news. They found out right away, obviously. But in the cities around, they didn't really know right away. But slowly the word spread, and a city called Chernigov, which was a Chassidish city, the news arrived about the Stalkus on Hishayna Rabbah. Basically a week later. The Rav in Chernigov was a famous Chassid named Radatz, Rab David Tzvi Chaim. So when he came to Shul Shmini Atzeres night for Hakafos, someone told him these words: "The Rebbe is avek." It's in Yiddish a way of saying that the Rebbe left, and he left this earth. When he heard that, the shock was so deep, he fainted. Pasha fainted. And they couldn't revive him, no matter what happened. Nobody could revive him. And it was getting dangerous. He was lying there, passed out. They finally decided, you know what? They'll bring his father, who's still alive. His father's name was Peretzchan. Very big chassid. He's actually known as the only chassid that saw 6 Rebbes in his lifetime. He was a child. He was a baby when the Alter Rebbe, he saw the Alter Rebbe as a child, and he saw the Frierdiker Rebbe when the Frierdiker Rebbe was a child. So he saw 6 Rebbes. But he wasn't ready at that point. Yeah, the Einikel. Yossel Matz?
Oh, yeah.
From Paris Chain. Okay. Yeah. So they called Rab Peretz. They couldn't. They had to carry him actually because he was already old and ailing. So they brought him to the shul to try to revive his son. So he bent down to the Radatz who was lying on the ground, and he whispered to him, he said to him, "A Rebbe geht kein Licht weg. A Rebbe never leaves." And that did revive him, and he got up. I'm sure it still wasn't exactly in a great mood. I heard the story when I was a Bach in 770 from some of the older Chassidim. And you understand the context. Now here, it's going to be 29 years from Gimmel Tammuz. And listen, everybody has a nefesh habamis, an animal soul, a yetzer hara. And you have to wonder. Sometimes you feel, okay, if I have a question. So 31 years ago, before Chav Zayin Adar, you could just write directly to the Rebbe. You can go to dollars or some other way by Farbrengen and get direct access and direct answers. Now, at least physically, it appears that Rebbe is not here. So a story like this helps us somewhat make a little more, not necessarily more pleasant, but definitely understand that certain truths don't die and don't leave. So I want to talk about that a bit because that's obviously the biggest challenge we all have. Nobody's going to suggest that Gimmel Tammuz is an easy day. However you understand it, whether you do understand it, you don't understand. I'm not from those that understand it, frankly, because I don't think it was part of the plan. What I mean by that is we never were told that this is part of the plan. And things like this in general, not always you have to have answers. Not everything needs an explanation. In the early years, 1950, 51, after the Frierdiker Rebbe's Histalkus, so people were writing to the Rebbe, encouraging the Rebbe to take assumed leadership. As you know, the Rebbe resisted. For different reasons, he gave different reasons. There's one interesting letter, someone writes to the Rebbe, "What's going to be with us if you don't become Rebbe? What's going to be?" That's what he wrote. What's with Zayin? And the Rebbe's response is printed in the Rebbe's letters in Igris. It's not a response you usually hear people repeat because I guess you'll see in a moment why. The Rebbe's answer is, "Was wird sein? The größere Sache wird sich wischen, was wird sein." There are bigger things I don't know what will be. You ask me what will be. We have a big Rebbe, and he's going to take care of things. It's not our job to answer everything. So I'm not here to come and explain Gimmel Tammuz. Everybody can do whatever they wish. People feel they need explanation. Good luck. To me, it's not about explaining. It's about what it means. The Rebbe's question was always, I saw a letter from the Rebbe to a doctor. If you want the letter, I could send it to you. It's an English letter. He writes, a doctor asked the Rebbe about the Holocaust. And he asked the Rebbe, why? Why did God do that? And the Rebbe's response is very blunt. He says, if God wanted us to know why, he would have told us. The fact that he didn't tell us means that we don't need to know why. And we have to ask the question, not why, but what are we going to do about it? That's the whole gist of the letter. It's a 3-page letter. So why? We don't have answers to many whys. But what we can do, that for sure we have to ask. And then the letter, just as an interesting footnote, the Rebbe writes at the end of the letter, you may think that this letter was written to you intellectually from my mind. And we all know the Holocaust is not just intellectual, it's an emotional thing. So I want you to know that I did not write this academically and detached. I too am a Holocaust survivor. That's what the Rebbe says. I lost my brother, my grandmother, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and other close relatives. You don't see that every day, a letter like that. The Rebbe said that. So, I'm not going to get into the why, we'll get into what we have to do. And more importantly, the challenge, as I said, it is a challenge. we all would have preferred the Rebbe to be here physically and continue to do exactly as he did before Gimmel Tammuz, and relatively much easier. Look, let's be honest, it didn't take a lot of effort to go to 770 on Simchas Torah and dance, and the Rebbe led the whole thing. All you got to do is dance. It didn't take a lot of Aveda Primis. But today it's much more challenging. So, a few things I want to share in this context that I think it's important to establish. Maybe I'll start on a personal note. People often ask me, so what did I do on Gimmel Tammuz? What happened? How did I feel? So obviously we all felt quite sad, to put it mildly. But that's on a personal note. But the big question is, was there a crisis in faith? Let's put it that way. That's what people want to know. Do you have a crisis in faith? And you hear the Rebbe said Mashiach is coming, Otot, all the expressions, the enthusiasm and the whole mood. Anyone that was around then, I was there every Shabbos, every Farbrengen, the whole, the Rebbe kept accelerating that it's going to immediate, now. So of course then suddenly, that sad Monday night, Chav Zayin Adar, the Rebbe had a stroke. Seems like a major setback. What happened with all the Rebbe's promises and predictions, and made it very clear it's happening. And then came, you go from there, 2.5 or 2 years and some months later, you have Gimmel Tammuz. The stroke, we still hoped, like by the heart attack in Tafshan Lamed Ches, that things would turn around. But then it didn't turn around in our eyes. So how could you not suddenly, even the biggest maimon, biggest person of faith, what happened here? Like, what's going on? And many people, I've heard many things people have said. So, since we're among family here, right, we could talk openly. And so I had my Gimmel Tammuz experience, so to speak, or Gimmel Tammuz moment, if you wish, a number of years earlier. It means my crisis of faith, if you will. And that was in Tafshan Lamed Ches, I mentioned before. So that was the year Shmini Atzeres night. It was 1977. I was a bacher of 20 years old. So I was like in my heyday. I was working the Siches. I was working the Sefer Al-Kutim of the Tzemach Tzedek. I was like at the top of the, there's no other world than the Rebbe. Nothing else. Eineid Movadim. And here the Rebbe had the heart attack that night. I remember it like today. I was standing very close. The Rebbe turned white, like a sheet pale. We all saw there was a problem. And then later we learned that it wasn't just a heart attack, it was a serious heart attack. And everything changed that night. Later we would learn at 5 a.m. when the Rebbe had a killer heart attack, what they called. It's really, at the time we didn't know what's going to happen. It did turn around miraculously, and not only did the Rebbe survive it, came back stronger than ever, literally almost doubling everything. I'm not exaggerating. Farbrengens would go for 3 hours on Shabbos from 1:30 to 4:30. By the time 1980 came around, 2-3 years after the heart attack, Farbrengens were going to 536, almost double. You could see it from just the volume of pages. This we saw with our own eyes. So obviously when it came Chav Zayin Adar, we felt the same idea is going to happen. Let me just share some of my own internal processes that happened back then. So here I am, a bocher, 20 years old, 21, 20. And I remember thinking this was not spoken then. Then you could not say anything close. The Rebbe was immortal and impossible to talk about the Rebbe in any other way than immortality. So to talk about the Rebbe in any mortal way or what will happen, God forbid, etc., was not even, that was forbidden. I don't know what people were thinking, but even thinking, probably some people didn't think that way. But achatose ani maskir, you know the expression. We don't believe in confession, but I shall confess that I did think. And I was thinking, what's going on here? Here we are busting our chops, people giving their lives for the Rebbe, going on shlichus. People's entire life decisions were being made. Us young people, we were making decisions about our future. People were ready to do everything for the Rebbe. And what happens if, God forbid, God decides to take the Rebbe that year? I couldn't speak about anybody with it because, I don't know, they excommunicate you or whatever it may be. There was no COL, so didn't have that stuff. But I remember internally struggling with this. And it wasn't coming from a place of deep doubts. It was just a normal question anyone would ask, And it happens to be Ashracha Pratis. At the time, I remember reading a story that today many people know the story, but today there are many more details we didn't have then. The story was Shmuel Munkes, the chassid of the Alter Rebbe. So I'll tell the story the way the Rebbe writes in the Shimis. It's with more details today. So Shmuel Munkes, as we know, was a famous chassid. And so the story the Rebbe writes like this. That when they came to arrest the Alter Rebbe, Yutas Kislev, they came to arrest him for counter-revolutionary activity or whatever they called it. So the Alter Rebbe had a secret hiding place in his house, that in case they would come, he could hide there or escape through there. So middle of one night, the czars, the soldiers or ministers or someone came to arrest him or to interrogate him or whatever. And Alter Rebbe indeed saw, so he hid. This is the way the Rebbe writes to the Shim that he heard from the Friedrich Rebbe. And they began looking at this and they began questioning the Alter Rebbe's wife. And to the point that they slapped her and they knocked out a tooth. That's what it says, the Shim. Just telling you the way the story is told. Okay. She, of course, didn't tell them anything. They left. The Alter Rebbe came out from his hiding place. A few minutes later, or a little while later, it's middle of the night, there's a knock on the window. Which, again, they got frightened. Who's here? Middle of the night. Shmuel Munkes. Clearly, maybe another discussion. Shmuel Munkes definitely was a Nachtvegel, because he always seemed to come at night. First story of Shmuel Munkes, the Alter Rebbe was also at night, right? So, there are people that are night the birds. Upon him, but the Alter Rebbe lets him into the house and says, Du kommst echt bei Nacht. You also come at night, which means you're also coming to frighten us. Who comes at night? It's called Mazikim come at night. The criminals come at night. So the Shmuel Munkes says to the Alter Rebbe, Ich hab nicht gewusst, als beim Rebbe mit der Nacht. I didn't know by the Rebbe there's night, meaning that the Rebbe has anything to be afraid of. A Rebbe has night. Night is for people who are frightened. Okay, then the Rishima continues, and here's the part that most of us are familiar with. I'll say exactly the way it's written there, with the details to the point they had to take out so sharp that you'll see 3 dots when it's printed, because what Shmuel Munkes said was quite very intense. The Alter Rebbe asks him, should I cooperate and allow myself to be arrested by the Tsar, by the Russians? So Shmuel Munkes said the famous line. He said, "Mamonavshach." Either or. Mr. Rebbe, if you're a Rebbe, so what are you afraid of? You'll be protected. Nothing will happen to you. Oneib nisht, and here's where it's ... And I'll tell you what the ... says. Eib nisht kum de akelin kop fatzunemen the Geschmack von Elam Hazeh von Azefel Eden noch Sidim. If not, you deserve a bullet to your head for taking away the pleasure from this world from so many Chassidim, or Eden, I think it says Chassidim. That's what he answers. That's the end of the Shema. You can imagine why they took out that line. But think about it. I mean, who says such a thing to anybody, let alone to a Rebbe? Who would say such a thing? So that means Shmuel Munker must have been some level. But he was a Ish Emes. He was saying the truth. By him, there's no question that the Rebbe is a Rebbe. He was just saying, you're asking such a question whether you should be arrested. What does that mean? Because if you're not a Rebbe, then you deserve a lot worse than being arrested. Basically, you're just a con artist, essentially. I mean, I'm using my own grubber language here. That's what he's saying. You deserve a bullet in your head. This is what I remember reading those days after the Rebbe's heart attack. And I'll tell you what effect it had on me. A radical effect. I remember saying to myself, you know what? Grow up. If you're in this only to have fun when things are going well, that's for children. If a Rebbe is MS, he's MS no matter what. It's not only when things are going well. Even if there's heart attack and we don't know what Hashem's plans are. He's MS, he's MS. Doesn't matter whether you understand it or whether it makes sense to you. And if you're not in it, so get out right now. What do you? You're only there when everything is beautiful. Only for the party. It's like you're in the army, the military. You're in. You're not just in when you win a battle. Sometimes a battle will be lost, but you're still a military person. You're still committed. And I grew up very quickly those days. And I had to make a decision. When is a person really tested? Not when everything's going well. And to quote, if I may, Warren Buffett, he says, until the tide is out, you don't know who's been swimming naked. Understand? When everything is going well, everybody can believe they're top of the world. When the tide is out, suddenly you start seeing who's who. So when all the Giluyim are there, it's beautiful. No one takes away from that. When the light is shining brightly, you don't see the cracks. So to me, in many ways, I don't know if I could call it immunized, but definitely that experience when I was 20 had a tremendous impact. That later, when Gimmel Tammuz came, not that I didn't have sadness like everybody was saddened, but I did not have a crisis of faith because I already had that already, and I had resolved it. Emes is Emes, whether you like it or not. I mean, we've gone through Eden, the worst of the worst. How do they manage going through a Holocaust and still retaining Amunah? It's hard to imagine. And those that have their challenges, we don't judge them. But how did a person go through that? People lost entire families. Because a certain Emes is Emes. The Rebbe once said in the Farbrengen that Amunah is such that a question doesn't make weaker and an answer doesn't make stronger. Because it's a connection. It's like if you love somebody, if you truly love them, there's nothing that can break that bond. Look, the Eibishter loved the Eden, then they built a golden calf, Egel. They betrayed God, total infidelity, and still Moshe was able to accomplish Salachtik Idverech. It wasn't easy. It took 80 days. Because certain things are just not breakable if they are indeed true. That's what Shmuel Munkus was basically saying. It's nitzchi. Yeah, it may not look the way we'd like it to look. So I'm not saying that Gimmel Tammuz doesn't have questions, as I said before. That's the why. We may not have an answer for why. But what? Fine, let it be your child. Let it be your crisis of faith and make a decision. Grow up and decide, are you in or you're not in? I would obviously encourage anyone to be in. But if someone said to me, you don't have to Gimmel Tammuz, I don't know if I can continue. Fine, but then just drop the whole thing. Don't be halfway. To make believe like you're a chassid, that you don't really. A Rebbe is a Rebbe. I mean, there's certain language that I hear sometimes people speak these days that make you cringe. Talk about the Rebbe in a way. If the Rebbe is anything, he's a Ish Alekim. He's not a great man because he had blue eyes and he's smart and we like him. It's because God chose him and put him on this earth as a shliach of the Eibishter to accomplish a mission. If you don't believe that, then the Rebbe absolutely is a human being and he's fallible and all that. But if he's a Ish Alekim, and when he said in Bos Legani Tavshin Yud Aleph that this is the day that Mashiach is going to come, is Eishemis. He's not saying his own words. I know people, we all know people, that if all the doctors told you not to do an operation, God forbid, or on a child, and the Rebbe says not to do it, you wouldn't do it. What does that mean? You're putting your life of your own life and other people's life in the Rebbe's hands. That means you believe that the Rebbe is a godly person. Or else, why would you do that? If the Rebbe says something that all the doctors say otherwise. So it's a strong commitment. I'm not denying it's a strong commitment.
No, thank you so much.
We have to grow up and face that. I remember, it was a few years ago. So there was some bochum talking. They weren't talking very respectfully. People talk about the Rebbe sometimes, as I said, in ways that are not appropriate. I don't even want to repeat the lines and words. Some people suggest, I've heard this, the Rebbe felt already after the Rebbetzin passed away, he was becoming, I'm not just saying it because there people have that on their minds. The Rebbe was desperate, started speaking desperately. As I said, 1 second. I've got no problem if you want to humanize the Rebbe, but then humanize him all the way. Maybe in Tafshin Yud, if he also spoke desperately. What does that mean? God is speaking through him, you believe. So everything he says is Shechina Metaberes. Where suddenly did the Shechina stop speaking through the Rebbe? That's making cheshbon is that the Rebbe was depressed, the Rebbe was down, stuff like that. Again, I'm saying it only not because I believe it in any way, and I don't even want to repeat things like this, but since people have it on their minds, and I said we're speaking openly, so I'm already turning an age where I have nothing to lose, so I might as well say everything.
We still called you.
Huh?
We still got you to speak to.
Right. Yeah. No, look. Let me tell you. I'm getting to make a major point here. So this is really you talk about. This is really the question of the nitzchias and the emes of a Rebbe and what he stands for. It's really nothing less than that. Before Gimmel Tammuz, b'chof hazai noder, that question was not forced upon us. Now it is. I am telling you right now, as I said with Shmuel Munkus, there's no question what the answer should be. But each of you, you're adults, you have to find that answer. So I remember hearing a story. I heard it in the name of Shmuel Levittin, who heard it in the time of the Rebbe, from the Chassidim of the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Marash. The Tzemach Tzedek, as we all know, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek were both, besides the same name, they're both the Rebbetzins passed away before. 5 years. The Tzemach Tzedek's Rebbetzin passed away, Chaim Mushke, passed away in Tafresh Chof Aleph. Tzemach Tzedek was Stalkus, was Chavov. Same thing, Memches, Rebbetzin Chaim Mushke, Chav Beshvat. So when the Tzemach Tzedek's Rebbetzin passed away, so it says that Tzemach Tzedek went into seclusion. There were no more Maimorim, no more Yechidus. It was very secluded. And we have it written up in different places, to the point that Chassidim were really, obviously, really distressed about it. And they came to the Tzemach Tzedek and said to him, so the Tzemach Tzedek said, what do you want? Ein melech b'lei matrinis. A king is not a king without his queen. So they brought Maimar Chazal that the queen is the Torah, and Tzemach Tzedek did not accept all that. Just as, not an aside, but just for the record, when the Rebbetzin did Stalkus of the Rebbetzin, the Rebbe asked Rabbi Pekarsky, the Rav, what's the din? If your wife passes away, do you still have a connection to your father-in-law? You hear this? That's what the Rebbe asked. Now, he was a wise man, and he said right away, what's a shayla shtov sededen, nothing changes. But the Rebbe should even ask that question. Remind me of the story of Tzemach Tzedek, ein melech b'lei matanisa, so to speak. Okay, so the Tzemach Tzedek, as I said, we don't know how long, but for a period of time, there were no Maimorim, no Chassidus, no Yechidus. After a few months, I think that's what I recall, Tzemach Tzedek gave notice that he's coming to say a Maimar Chassidus. So you can imagine the grace of Simcha. Chassidim came together. The Tzemach Tzedek is going to say a Maimar after all this time. For the record, as you probably know, the Rebbe also stopped saying Maimorim, not right after Chav Beis Shvat, but a few months later. Basically, summer Memches, the Rebbe stopped saying Maimorim, except 2 Maimorim that he said later, a few more Maimorim perhaps. So everybody came to Lubavitch to hear the Rebbe's Maimon. Rabbi Hillel Paritcher was a chassid. He was then already older chassid. His istalkus would be Tafresh Chav Dalet. So it was close to that time. And Hillel Paritcher, also, by him, a Maimon of the Rebbe was like the most precious thing. He came from Paritch. He had to come, they had to carry. He was not well, he was already. And they're all waiting in the Zal, or wherever it was, that some Tzaddik could come out to say the Maimon. Anyway, 15 minutes pass, half hour passes, nothing. Rabbi Hillel couldn't stand any longer because he wasn't feeling well. So he went out, he was walking out to, I guess, whatever. As he's walking out, he hears 2 younger lights speaking. And they said things that disturbed him greatly. They started speaking about Tzemach Tzedek, not in a way you speak about a Rebbe. Like the Rebbe is a Rogefallen or Morashched, I don't know exactly what the Lashon, but something of that nature. Suddenly, Rabbi Hillel heard that. He had a new surge of energy. And he went over to these 2 younger lights and said these words. Listen to these words. I'll say the Yiddish and then I'll translate. He said, Schwenzelach, Schwenzelach, Schwenzelach. Was meint A Rebbe is eigen an nos mit amoil? A Rebbe is elikus. Und b'shash da helam af elikus, da helam af Rebbe. So let's translate. Schwenzelach, Schwenzelach, Schwenzelach. Each of you can translate as you like. There's milder translations. There are more extreme translations. I don't want to use any expletives. So you could say idiots, 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 or you could say tails, 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 or yeah. But 3 times he said it, and said, "What do you think? A Rebbe is eyes, a nose, and a mouth. A Rebbe is godliness, elikus. And when there's a helam of elikus, when there's a concealment on elikus, there's a concealment on the Rebbe." I mean, even though this resonates when you hear it, but it's like so well articulate. I mean, coming from Rabbi Hillel Paritcher. If a person doesn't understand that about a Rebbe, I think you're missing the whole alabay. That's the whole yesod. They said it's not a Rebbe, it's just a smart man who's experienced and understands things and learned a lot of Torah, a Talmud Chacham. Even a tzaddik in Tanya is quite difficult to attain. But a Rebbe, it's a whole different category. So when you're talking about that type of caliber of an individual, so the sprach to say that Rebbe is down, desperate. I mean, the same Rebbe that said Bosel Gane Tavshin Yud Aleph said the Sicha Chav Chesnis and Tavshin Nun Aleph. For anyone to even suggest that one was said in different state of mind, or the Rebbe in different mood, to me, I'd call it Kfira Legamri. You can't divide God into 2 parts. The same God that said Anecha Hashem Alekecha, yeah, said the Teichecha also. There's some things in the Torah that are not pleasant to hear. But it's the same ad Eibishter. You can't divide Emes into parts. You can't say, this is the Shechina speaking. So I would say that this Gimmel Tammuz, if you want, is a real litmus test of where you stand. Where you stand in the Emes of the Rebbe. Now, would we have preferred not having such a test? Of course. Been a lot easier, more pleasant. That instead of me sitting here and all of us sitting in Farbrengen, the Rebbe should speak and continue to carry as he did. But that's not what the plan was, whatever mysterious reason. Maybe this goof is the reason, the ultimate Momat Lamaila is when, like I said, the tide is out. Now let's see what you can do. The lights have dimmed, in Giluyim at least. Now let's see what you're made of. Everybody dancing Simchas Torah by Chafis, you couldn't know who was complete Mekusha or not because it was easy. The easiest thing was a party. But then, when you're alone and you don't have that so-called revealed support, you have to your own privacy, make a cheshbon hanefesh. Where do you stand? As I said, I had this crisis in Tov Shel Lamed Ches. I call it a crisis because it could have gone either way. But the Shmuel Munker story for me, maybe that's why there was that story. That he said it in such harsh words that he says to the Rebbe, you deserve a bullet to your head. Because like I said, it wasn't even a Havamina by him such a possibility. There's no question that Rebbe is a Rebbe. So, I'll tell you, in Tavshin Mem Zayin, the year of the court case, Hey Tavis. So that was that year, and we all know how the Rebbe established that this was in the federal court, was established once and for all that the Sforim belonged to the library of Agudas Chassidei Chabad. Basically, quoting the Rebbitzon's words when they asked the Rebbitzon at the end of the deposition, which the Rebbe said clearly in Asicha, this was the cornerstone of Judge Sifton's ruling. When the Rebbitzon was asked, so who do the books belong to, the Rebbe or the Chassidim? And she said the Rebbe himself belongs to the Chassidim. The books belong to the Chassidim. So this was, many people don't really fully understand, and many people ask me all the time, what's Hey Tavis? What exactly is Hey Tavis? Yutas Kislev, okay, Chassidus was exonerated. Alter Rebbe was spreading Chassidus, Chabad. There was a question in heaven about whether it's the right thing to do. And after Yutas Kislev started the main Yefutzman Esechos. What exactly did Hey Tavis? What was the before and after? Was it just winning a case against Barry Garari? Okay, so that's a one-time thing, and that's it, it's over. What permanent message did Hey Tavis leave with us? And it remains for many very elusive. So it was Hey Tavis wasn't Tavis, of course. A few months later, one second, Nissen was the Tavis Shvat. 3 months later, Shabbos Pasha Vayikra Tov Shemem Zayin. I would suggest you all in Gimmel Tammuz learn this sikh. It's a good Gimmel Tammuz sikh, even though it's not said on Gimmel Tammuz. So the Rebbe speaks about Nisim and Nitzchis of Nisim. I mean, it's very clear that was connected to the Hey Tavis Parsha. I had the schus to prepare the sikha. And we know from behind the scenes that the Rebbe was very cherished the sikha very much. As a matter of fact, it's the only time ever we got a compliment. All my years in working sikhs, people ask me if I ever got a compliment. I got plenty of reprimanded, that I could tell you. But a compliment only once, then that one. The Rebbe wrote on it, Higdilu Lases. To the point, I'll tell you in a moment what he says in that sikh. The points I want to make at least. To the point that week, you may know that the Rebbe was being Magiya the sikhs. These were the Farbrengen, the active Farbrengen. So the Rebbe started being Magiya then almost, not every week yet, but started then. There was a second series that was coming out, we all know Likutei Sichos. That was a likud, basically a collection of sichos, usually from previous years, that were prepared. And the Rebbe was Magiya that every week, and then later becomes a series called Likutei Sichos. That week they had prepared a sicha, the Vad Lafot Sichos. Rabbi Alltime, Rabbi Shapiro. And the Rebbe told them not to publish the sikha they prepared. They should translate this sikha from Vayikra Mem Zayin into Hebrew, because that was Yiddish, and they should publish that. So they did that. So the Rebbe felt, even though it was already published, but the Rebbe felt the likud should also be the same sikha. It just shows you the Rebbe's value of that sikha. The whole sikha is about how a nosi is a nitzchi. That's the whole theme in the headline, that a nosi is eternal. He speaks, of course, about the month of Nisan, we say Nisim. And also Beis Nisan is the Istalkus of the Baal Rebbe Rashab, and the beginning of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Yud Aleph Nisan, of course, the birthday of the Rebbe. All that's alluded to or said specifically in that sikha. So what does he say? I just want to repeat 2 or 3 points. So he brings there from the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer, Reishis Goyim HaMolek. The first Maimer the Frierdiker Rebbe said when he became Rebbe in 1920 was the last Maimer that the Rebbe Rashab said that same year. And there he talks about how Kedusha le'zazimim kema. Everything holy never changes. That's why, for example, you're not allowed to walk on the Temple Mount, Har HaBayis. Why? There's nothing there now. It's a wilderness. Because Kedusha that was there, Beis Hamikdash does not disappear. It never leaves. And then he goes on to say, this is a Chassidus language of Chassidus, the Eidos and the Kalim, not just the Eidos, but the Kalim of Atzilus are also Nitzchim. And then the Frierdiker Rebbe tells a story. In the Maimer, he says in the year Tofresh Mem Hey Mem Vov, either basically when he was 5 or 6 years old. Frierdiker Rebbe was born Tofresh Mem, 1840, with Beis Tammuz. So this happened in 1845 or 1846. Huh? That he was playing in the room, in the Cheder Yechidus of his father, the Rebbe Rashab, which was before that the Cheder Yechidus of the Rebbe Marash. And suddenly his father walks in, the Rebbe Rashab, dressed with a kapota and with a gartel, like he was going into Yechidus to his father. Now this is already, remember the Rebbe Tzemach said, the Rebbe Marash's Stalkus was in Mem Gimmel, Tafresh Mem Gimmel. So it was after. He says he walked in, and it looked exactly as he walked in the days when his grandfather, Rebbe Marash, was alive. He says, and my father was standing by the table of his father and saying something quietly, just as in the time when he did it, the chayiv of the Rebbe Marash, v'zolgo ein of demoyes, and his eyes were dripping with tears. Tears were coming out of his eyes. That's what the Rebbe writes as a child. Why, he says? Because the kelim of Atzilus, the kelim of the Rebbe, not just his neshama, but his table and his chair and his bookcases and his room are exactly as they were before his talkus. That's what the Rebbe brings in that Sicha Vayikra Tashim Mem Zayin in explaining the Nitzchis of a Rebbe. So these are things that, this is the theme of Gimmel Tammuz. So Nitzchis, you only really appreciate when it's challenged. You know, when something is, you see it around you and you see it all alive and dynamic, then you don't ask questions. You want to really know if something's nitzchi, you have to look when there's a question where there may be a challenge. Gimmel Tammuz was Motzei Shabbos Keirach. Keirach challenged, what do you need a Rebbe for? Madua Tisnasu, Kala Eidik Deishim. Everybody's holy. So Keirach challenged the concept of a Rebbe. So Gimmel Tammuz is a question, but the answer is very immediate. This is our challenge to establish is the Rebbe Nitzchi in your life. When I say Rebbe, I mean everything the Rebbe represents. And that is the essence of what this day is. So, as I said before, the why, I don't know if we'll ever have an answer to why. But what we should do about it, if indeed you come to that maskana that the Rebbe and everything he stands for lives forever, and how does it live through us, Zari B'chaim, which means you and I, then I think it's very clear what the directive is. So we can't be busy philosophizing, okay, 29 years passed, what happens now? Why didn't it happen? These are all good questions, but it doesn't address the most important thing, is what you and I are going to do about it. What actions we're going to take. And by the Rebbe, it always came down to, what are you going to do? So whenever anyone asks me, so how do you explain all this? 29 years have passed. And who says another 29 years, God forbid, won't pass? So I said, it's a nice question, but I don't know, I can't give you an answer because I don't have an answer. The only question I can ask is, what am I doing? Now, if you say, everybody here says, we did everything possible, and I really don't know, have a clue what more to do, okay, then we could have a debate. But I can't say that in my right mind. You know, I remember Motel Chain, Olav Shalom, he passed away during COVID. So every time I met him in 770, he would always tell me the same thing. He says, "Du weißt doch, first Arum der Welt, you know the whole world, you travel, you know the whole world is ready for the Gula already. And Mashiach, everybody knows the Rebbe's name, everyone knows Chassidus." I said, "Everybody?" He says, "Yeah, look at every falafel shop in Israel, there's a picture of the Rebbe and the taxi drivers." So I never wanted to, why should I want to throw cold water on his? So I said to him, remember once or twice I said the same, I said, "Motel, you ever hear of a country called China?" China. He said, "Yeah." I said, "You know how many Chinese there are?" "How many?" I said, 1.7 billion. I said, 1.8 billion. He says, "Billion or million?" I said, billion. So I said, "How many of them know the Rebbe's name and Chassidus, the word Mashiach?" He says, "Okay, declaim the Gelchen as fine." Okay. So there you go. So he dismissed all the Chinese. So I said, "You ever hear of a country called India?" Indiana. So he says, "Indiana, is geharget." All the Indians were killed, in the United States, right? There's not many. So I said, "Not the American Indians. There's a there's a country. How many people there?" Then it was around 1.5 billion. Anyway, he said to me, "These guys that do customer service for Dell," that's what he said to me. "They drive Ubers." So I said, "Okay, so you dismiss now basically 3.3 billion, almost half the world." So I told him, I don't think we've already reached every person on earth. Now, don't get me wrong. All it may take is reaching one more person and we tip the scale. It's not like we have to, but from the derech hateva, from perspective where I'm at, I can tell you there are many people still to be reached. Let's put it that way. So to say that we finished everything we could do, 2000 I can't say that. Maybe Rabbi Rosenfeld can. Huh?
Absolutely. Everybody together over here.
Okay. So.
Don't speak about Pittsburghers.
Okay. No, I'm speaking to myself here. So that is, look, this is Farbrengen. Everybody's entitled to, you can rebut and disagree with me entirely. I'm perfectly fine. I'm secure enough. But I have to say what I really feel and believe. So the 2 points I'm making is, number one, this is a real, what do we call it? I said litmus test, a real Even HaBeichin, where you stand with the Rebbe. That's Gimmel Tammuz, a day of accountability, let's put it that way. And secondly, a day of action. So I, for one, I continuously look at it this way. I've been around. I'm not a kid anymore. I was there in the heyday of things. I saw the Giluyim. And I benefited from it. I was as close as it gets, writing siches. I can't tell you the high and the experience of getting answers from the Rebbe and the questions and the Rebbe editing. Talking about thousands of pages of the Rebbe's direct communication. I was part of that. So it's not like it changed my life. But for me, the end of the story is, okay, so that makes me more responsible, not less. That means if it's so emes, then, yeah, there are a lot of questions. Gimmel Tammuz, I'd rather not happened. But now the responsibility falls on us in the deepest possible way. So for me personally, I was blessed with certain skills, and I try to use them, whether it's writing or teaching or... I wrote a book, yes, Torah Meaning for Life. Okay, it reached a few million people, but not billion. And I'm not saying this from an arrogant place. It means I don't think it reached as much as it should have reached. More importantly, why weren't another 150 books like that written by everybody here or other talented people? I'm not the only guy that can write. Why aren't there, Lahavdal of Havdalas, there are books out there, as other schools of spirituality that reach millions and millions of people? Well, we don't have the product. We have Chassidus. So I challenge you. Do you believe in this product? Obviously, you can't sell something you don't believe in. If you believe in the product, Chassidus and Rebbe is one thing. If you want the Rebbe to spread the Rebbe, you're spreading Chassidus. That's what it really means. You're spreading Elikus. And not just Elikus, the idea of Elikus and the experience of godliness. So we are all these messengers. We are the people. Who else if not us? There are millions of people that never met the Rebbe. They don't even know the Rebbe. They can't even appreciate it because they don't know who he is. We are, so to speak, the people that should be appreciating. So if we don't do it, who exactly is going to do it? And one final point I'll make is this. In this first Hakofa. Tafshin Chavov, it's a very powerful Sikha, Yud Shvat, where the Rebbe speaks about Mazare B'chaim, Yaakov Avinu Leimes. So the Gemara answers, how could you say that? Didn't the Chisobdu L'Sabdayu, Kovru Kovrayu, Chonta Chantayu? He was eulogized, he was embalmed, he was buried. So the Gemara answers, Ma Zari B'chaim, Afu B'chaim. It's a lot of discussion on this, many sikhs, but the Rebbe said something then which was really drives the point home. He said these words. He said 16 years ago, remember Tavshin Chavav is 16 years from Tavshin Yud. 16 years ago, the Shver, meaning the Frierdiker Rebbe, he controlled where he wanted to go, what he wanted to say, what he wanted to do. He controlled, nobody else. The Rebbe said what he wants to do. And today he says, we control it. Because Zari B'chaim. Because Begashmis, the Rebbe is either working through you or he's not working through you. You are now the arms and the legs and the mouthpiece. And the Rebbe said these words. So B'meil, if Zare do what they have to do in the spirit of what the Rebbe wanted, then hu B'chaim. And Rachmana Litzlan, if they don't, then he's not B'chaim. That's the power we have. You drive the point, that's a pretty, so it's exactly the point right now as well. The Rebbe really said this, Gimmel Shvat, 6 weeks before the stroke, the Rebbe said that when a Rebbe has a stroke, those that heard him speak have to be the mouthpiece. That means our mouths, like Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem, I'm not a speaker. Lo yish dvarim anechi aral svasayim, kvad peh, kvad loshen. So Hashem says, Mi som pel adam. You think I want you to give speeches? I want you to say what I want you to say. I give man a mouth to speak. So in a way, the biggest chus for a chassid is to be the mouthpiece. Whatever you heard, like we say, you heard Aleph, say Aleph. We are to be, and if, I don't want to say the negative, but the positive is that's how hu b'chayim. So you want to know, is the Rebbe alive? Ask yourself. You're going to have that answer. Because if we go to sleep and we don't do it, then kavyachol, yeah. Now, Kamuvin, the Rebbe stays hu b'chaim no matter what. But we're talking about in any active way, in any revealed way, it's really us. And not sure who else we can look at except us. L'chaim, l'chaim. La la la
Yeah, youngsters.
Thank you very L'chaim, l'chaim.
What is the definition of a generation?
What is the definition of a generation? If you ask the Talmudic scholars, I'm sure they could split hairs 1,000,000 ways and give you many opinions on this.
Mashiach is coming in our generation.
Oh, that's what he's asking.
I know where you're going. That's why I answered the way I did. I don't have an answer for you. I know I'm here, I'm alive. I know I have to do something with my life. You're here, so you have to do things with your life. I mentioned, I just spoke for an hour, that we don't have many answers. But one thing we do have. What are we going to do? If you want to ask the question, when the Rabbi said Der Ashvi, however you twist and turn it, let's even say you argue that Der Ashvi ended in the year 2000, whatever. Or with Mayor Harlick's passing. You know?
Just a few days ago.
Yeah. Let's say you say that. Then what? Let's you know, listen, I've been as you probably know, I get a lot of questions and I try to address things, but I want to be practical. I'm not saying this to you personally, I just don't have any more patience for questions that are going nowhere. Because at the end of the day, you're either going to come to a conclusion that I don't know when the generation ends, or the generation ended, and then you're going to say, so what happened? And to me, I was trained by the Rebbe that you don't ask what happened. The question is, what are you doing? So it ended up becoming an exercise that has nothing to do with what we're supposed to be doing with our lives. Tell me if somebody has another way of looking at it. So I want to stay away from mind games and chess games of figuring out, for all I know, I don't know when a generation ends. And even if I did know, I don't see how it changes anything. I do know the Rebbe said in the Maimer Bostel Gani Tavshin Aleph that this generation we're going to bring the Geula. I know I'm alive today. I feel I'm part of this generation. The only thing that matters is that I have to do what I can do. I say the same thing to you.
But the Rebbe didn't even say this generation. He said the De Hashvi.
Okay.
What does De Hashvi mean? It's a different question.
Yeah, and I'm saying if you may have an answer, you may not have an answer.
Okay, so then what should we do? You say to be spreading Rebbe's message about Elokus, spreading the idea about Elokus in the world. Specifically, the Rebbe's message is spreading Torah specifically to the rest of the world.
That's what I was going to speak about now.
Oh.
What we should be doing.
Okay.
Now, in the famous Sikha, the Rebbe said, Chav Ches Nissen, 32 years ago. He said, Tut alts was ihr kennt, the Rebbe's language. Do everything you can. The word everything is a very big word. The Rebbe could have said what specifically, but he said do everything. To me, that means that there are many things that can be done and should be done. You could even say, like you say, 8 days saying Shabbos. People have different methods. There's some people, like we look at shluchim. I've been around the world many times. I've seen many shluchim. All shluchim of the Rebbe doing great work. And you see, each one has a different focus. Some shluchim have become tremendous educators, built schools. Some people are great administrators, and they do a lot of social services. Some people are great fundraisers. And you go on and on. I remember going to, I'll give you two cities, Houston and Dallas, two sprawling Texan cities. Houston, Shimon Lazarus. Dallas, when I went, of Mendel Dabrowski, two Chassidus. And if you go there, it's both Chabad and both Chassidus, everything is the Rebbe, but it's a very different form. Shimon Lazarus built, in his image, a shtetl, a Lazarov shtetl. So you have people running around with kapotas, in mikveh, learning Rambam, and beautiful stuff. Mendel Dabrowski is a younger type of shliach. He built a bunch of young people who are saying l'chaim and smoking cigars and learning chassidus, and that one is not right or wrong, because the Rebbe made it like this: as long as you stay within the framework of Torah and chassidus, there are many ways to do things. Here, Rabbi Rosenfeld, you're here for many years. There's one pula. There's many pulas for different audiences. So when the Rebbe said two talts, I see it as really creating a situation that everybody can now is included. Had he said one thing, then it would have been only for those people that do that thing. That means each of us have to look, what are my talents? What are my skills? How could I use that to spread? I'll spread what? So let's go back 9 generations. You don't have to go 1 generation, 9 generations. So thank God the Baal Shem Tov happened to ask Mashiach when he's going to come. He could have not asked, but he did ask. And Mashiach told him in no uncertain terms. He said, you want to know when I'm going to come? 3 words that became the theme, the mission statement, 3 words. That the Magid and the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, Rebbe Marash, Rebbe Rashab, Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe never wavered from. This has been the driving force. So, you want to put it in real accountability terms? You have to ask yourself, I have to ask myself, we all have to ask ourselves, what am I doing for your futsum and chutz? You want the asis of the Rebbe? When the Rebbe was said, what should we do to bring Mashiach? The Rebbe said, Derech Yeshara, don't do any new, not looking for new innovations. Learn in Yonigul and Mashiach and live with it. When CNN asked the Rebbe, what's his message? Increase in acts of goodness and kindness. So then, of course, the question people say, oh, so it's back to the old story. That's what we've been doing already 9 generations. What's the Rebbe's Chiddush? So first of all, like I said in my talk this evening, a Chiddush, original and good, doesn't have to be like it was never said before. There's an expression, Kol Masha Talmud Vasik Asel L'Chadash, Nit L'Moshe M'Sinai. Everything that a great student is Mechadish, innovates, was already given to Moshe at Sinai. So what's the Chiddush then? Why do you call it Chiddush? The Rebbe Rashab in Quintus Eitz HaChaim says, B'derech HaTzachus, he says, not like the Chiddushim of those that are so big, they weren't even given by Sinai.
Those are the Emes Chidushim.
Huh? Those are the Emes Chidushim that were not given, because the things that are Chidushim, real Chidushim, is taking ideas that were there, the Chiddush is bringing it to Chinese and to Japanese and Indians that didn't hear it before. Or for that matter, to Chassidim and Lubavitches that, someone once went over to the Rebbe Tishrei and said, he's saying L'chaim for all those Chassidim that couldn't make it here, right, to be by the Rebbe. So the Rebbe said, you should say L'chaim for those that are here and are not here. All right. The President of the United States is watching.
No, why not?
Potentially.
He wants to know what to do. What do you think?
Or the Rebbe once said to Zalman Garai, I think, he said, there are a few people who sleep with their eyes closed at a Farbrengen, and most sleep with their eyes open. So you could be here and not be here. I remember an it brings the who brought from the 7th heaven to the 6th heaven, and that Yitzchak brought from the 6th to the 5th. Moshe brought down, we're not talking about 2 Shchinuses, 1 God. The Rebbe said the same thing. The Alter Rebbe was the Derishan, so he was Megala Shchina. The Rebbe, Der Ashvi, our generation, is meant to take the Shechina and make it tangible reality in this world. And the question is this doable? Obviously, absolutely. The Rebbe says it's doable, so it's doable. Do you feel it's doable? That's the big challenge. To be very honest, I know people, no names, so there's no Lashon Hara, that tell me, see, this is not going to become tangible for most people in this world. They're not kalim for it. They're busy making money. They have other things, taivas, this and that. So I said, so basically what the Baal Shem Tov told Mashiach, what Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov, and what the Rebbe said, you're saying is not realistic. It's just for a few minyanim, a few 10 people, 20 people. And when the Rambam says, Yeshaya says, Mola Oretz Deis Hashem Kamayim LaYom HaChasim, that's just a euphemism. That's just like a moshel. It says the whole world will be filled with divine knowledge. The whole world means Lo Ye'esa Kol Ha'elam. The whole world will be busy but nothing but knowing God. So he says, I don't know, the people I work with, they're not interested in knowing God. Very fair question, by the way. At least he's saying it. So now, you have a question like that? So let's answer it. That's like a very good question. How do you make God tangible? How do you make it palpable to every person? And it says everybody. It doesn't say any exceptions. How do you make it palpable to people who are not even interested? Even among, let's put it among Chassidim. Some people like to learn Chassidus and some don't. I meet Bochum or others all the time. They tell me, I like Nigla. I can't relate to Chassidus. It's too abstract. You know. So I said, so what do you say? Yeah, Lamites Malachis, Esesphiris. You know, it's all like, he knows the numbers. You know, it's a numbers game. So I'll share a few thoughts on this, but I think, remember again, Yediyah Samach, knowing the problem is half the cure. The question of a wise person is half an answer. If you don't ask this question, you're never going to get an answer. So yeah, let's take exactly, how do you make Mashiach palpable? How do you make Elokus palpable? Now, even the word Mashiach itself is also filled with all kinds of... How does the Alter Rebbe translate what Geula is, what Mashiach is? So in the beginning of chapter 37, Alter Rebbe says like this, Hine, Tachlis B'yis Ha'elmus, Tachlis Zu Shal B'yis Ha'elmus, of the Mesa Mashiach B'chis HaMesim, Kili, which is Gili Erein Sof, Be'elam Aseh Gashmi. He categorizes Mashiach Geula as the revelation of Elokus, godliness in this world. And that is through Masena V'Avadesena. That means when we do a mitzvah, we do our avodah in this world, we'll be Megala Elokus. The Mela, when you do that, what does it lead to? Cause and effect. You reveal something, so the result of it is the full revelation is the Geula. So how do you explain that to somebody in a tangible way? If we had the time, I'd go around the room right now and ask you, explain it to me. Make believe I'm a secular person or a person who doesn't know any of these things. That's how you practice. And then you go out and do it. I understand it's going to be very hard to be Meifetz Meyonis Chutza and bring Elokus to the Welt and bring Mashiach and Gula to the world if you don't know how to say anything about it. I mean, I think a lot of times when people say slogans and other things, for them that's the easy way to do it. Instead of have to actually explain it, you just say a slogan, which of course doesn't mean anything to most. So I'll explain it in my simple language as best as I can. This is something I've said many times, and I'd love to hear if anybody wants to weigh in. So there's a sikha. Two sichas, Achrik Deshim and Emer Tavshinun Aleph. It's printed as Muga Sefer Sichas Tavshinun Aleph. There in the Sikha, the Rebbe asked the question, says, I'm getting letters from people who they're telling me that they're afraid Mashiach comes. Because what will happen with all the equity? The Rebbe didn't use the word equity. But what will happen with everything they've accomplished in this world? People have built connections. They built bank accounts. They've gathered things, they own property. What will happen? Mashiach will come, everything, it's one of the most precious things. People tell you, it took me 20, 30 years to build the connections I have. What will happen with all of this? And the Rebbe said, in some, Kitzur, nothing to be afraid. Geula is everything there's in Geula plus an Aleph. So nothing is going to be diminished. It's only going to add. Everything you built and everything you have, another dimension will be added. The Aleph of Alufe Shalelo, the Lakus within your equity, within your furniture, within your connections, within your money, within everything. The famous Geula Geula theme. So I can tell you, I've used the Sikha hundreds of times, and I think successfully, to explain people who never heard the word Mashiach Geula, because the Rebbe said Mamash those words. He said, that's a chid, that's bringing the Shekhinah to Tachtenim. Let's talk now. So I'm going to give two examples. A letter from the Rebbe that he wrote to a person who owned a laundromat, of all things, and an event that happened in a conference. And I think these are very good examples for what does that mean, and how each of us can accomplish this. And then I would challenge every one of us. Now, if you can do that, go ahead and explain it to people. So there's a letter in Tavshin Yud Gimmel, I think. Early years, a letter in Hebrew, in the Igros Kodesh, the Rebbe writes to a person who owned, I think, a dry cleaners. That's what it sounds like. And the Rebbe said, everything that we see in here has to be a lesson of Avodas Hashem. That's what the Baal Shem Tov teaches. What's the lesson of Avodas Hashem from a laundry, from dry cleaners? Like, and the Rebbe goes on and says, what's the chiddush? What's the innovation of a cleaners? You buy a garment, you wear it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. At some point it gets soiled and wrinkled and dirty. So if you're a mensch, at some point you can't wear it again. I said if you're a mensch, just keep that in mind. That's tatech in a mensch. So you think, okay, you have to throw it out. No. Someone innovated the idea of cleaners. You bring it to the cleaner. They take the garment. They immerse it in water, but not just water, warm water. They mix it with chemicals. The chemicals remove stains, wrinkles, smudges, whatever. Then you take it out. You put it under a heavy press. And voila, there you go. The garment is fresh like new. And you can repeat this process many times for the lifetime of this garment. What's the lesson? Neshama shenasata bi tahiri. Every neshama is pure. But then life, the different experiences in life, they soil, they wrinkle, they stain a person. So you think it's a one-way street, so no. So the Torah tells us, cleaners teach us. You immerse the neshama in water. Ein mayim ela Torah. And not just water, cold water, warm water. Chmimus, Warmkeit. Passion. Then you mix it with chemicals. Every mitzvah is another chemical. And the chemicals remove the stains. And then you put it under Kabbalah sale. Basically, the accountability to something greater, like a Kabbalah sale, oil, like the press. And you have a fresh neshama tahirihi. And you can do this through your lifetime many times. That's the Rebbe's lesson. So that alone is gewaldic, right? I remember, after I read the letter, I happened to be walking up Kingston Avenue. I was by Empire. And there's a cleaners there between Empire and Montgomery. Then I moved a little further up, and I see cleaners on Kingston and Crown. There's one near Union. Then there's Albany and Troy. I never looked at a cleaners the same way again. Because till now, you look at a cleaner. Who looks even at a cleaners? When your wife forces you to have to take the cleaning, you take it to the place, and that's it. The force is just a little added little inside joke from my son here. Who even notices the cleaners? But now the Rebbe, through the eyes of a Rebbe, the eyes of Geula, the eyes of the Aleph, you suddenly see a cleaners is not just here to clean clothing. It's a lesson. Mipsari echzelaka. Mipsari. You see from our life, you can look and learn about a lakus. The cleaners teaches you a whole thing about a neshama. And take it a step further. You look at the pizza shop and the bakery and sweet, what is it called? Delight, sweet expression, whatever. And the grocery stores. And I don't just mean on Kingston Avenue, also here. What is this main street here? Murray. Basically, you can look at the same Gashmias, but when you look with the Aleph, you see it that the Eibishter gave these things as a dugma to understand godliness, to understand neshama, to make a lesson in life. Hira b'chaim. What's the Rebbe's most repeated expression in all Farbrengens? So many people say Amaisa Iker. That's a big one, but even more Teirem Lashon Hira. Everything is Hira. So there you have. Is this something we cannot do? We can't teach our children how to look at the world in that way. Teach ourselves, other people. This is called bringing Geula to people. This is called bringing Gilead and Sof Be'elam Hazeh Gashmi. It's not just some abstract idea about Eidin Sof Lifnei HaTzimtzum and how do you understand it. It's about seeing godliness in a dry cleaners, and seeing godliness in a slice of pizza, especially if it's delicious. Skafi is another story. We've got to talk about that too. The Frierdiker Rebbe once told, actually it was Zalman Gerari's father, Noskin Gerari, who served as a maskir, Frierdiker Rebbe, whenever they needed someone tough, so to speak, tough, kavyachol, where the doctors told the Rebbe he has to eat, whatever, so he would become the maskir. He was like so he once brought into the Frierdiker Rebbe, he brought in a cup of tea and a biscuit and a kichel. And he put it down. The doctors were very back with the Frierdiker Rebbe should drink and eat regular times. Comes back an hour later and nothing is sitting there. It wasn't touched. So of course you don't talk to Rebbe in Gashmitic terms. He says to the Rebbe, Nishmartem ha'edel nafshe seichem. And Frierdiker Rebbe says, which means you have to watch your health. So Frierdiker Rebbe says, was mit iskafia? What about iskafia? Which means like. So he answered. He said, iskafia is for the soldaten, nicht for the melech. So iskafia is for the soldiers. For us, not for you. That Rebbe needs iskafia. So the Frierdiker Rebbe answered, "Zij darfen und der will." They need iskafia, and this one wants. The Rebbe wants. Anyway, just speaking about iskafia. Point I'm making is, it requires a deliberate effort to think in this way. Go to that sikh in Achli Kadeshim Emer, and you see Mamash the Rebbe saying it. So you have to take it and translate. Okay, that's what it means. I've told the story with the cleaners to kids, 7-year-olds, and they understood it. I said, now take a toy or take something you're active with and show me what you can learn from it in life. You'd be surprised. Children have good imaginations. They have a good idea, but you have to speak in their language. You have to be Megala the Aleph. The second story, the second is a story that happened that I learned from this. I was once invited to a medical conference. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not the son of a doctor. And I'm not the father of a doctor. So what am I doing at a medical conference? Well, a doctor that knew me said, we'd like you to present a view of medicine in the future. Basically, Mashiach comes. Okay, interesting topic. I did a little research, and I read. And so I got up, and I gave a long talk. I said that the whole concept of disease, illness, and death, from a Torah point of view, is an anomaly. It's an aberration. Because if Adam and Chava had not eaten from the tree of knowledge, says they would have lived forever. Why? Because why should a soul and body ever have to separate? A soul doesn't run out of gas. It's not a car. Soul is giving divine energy forever. So why should the soul not continue to energize the body forever? The answer is because the body is the problem. Like, for example, you put, let's say, a liquid in a cup. Except for evaporation, there's no reason why should the liquid ever leave the cup. But if there's a puncture in the cup, then, like an appliance, the appliance wears down, so electricity can't manifest there. So the chet, basically sin, when you disalign yourself from the creator of the machine starts wearing down, and it cannot contain the neshama. So the neshama continues, but not in this guf. Through our avodah, when we correct the puncture, so to speak, tikkun ha'elam, tikkun of the birurim and so on, we fix the cup, we fix the appliance, the body, so the body can then once again manifest the soul forever. So the elimination, so disease and illness and death are all a result of the punctures. That was more or less what I presented. And that's why. So Tchisa Mesim is not even a chiddush. It's like the Gemara says, my delay hava is my dahava for sure. It's about reclaiming, revisiting what it was in its original form. Anyway, they were very well received, let's put it that way. So one doctor gets up and says, one of the hosts, if that's the case, what's going to happen with those doctors? No more healing, no more disease. Out of business, right? So after the prerequisite joke, maybe that's why you charge so much today for a long retirement, I said, on the contrary, and I took this from the Sikha, I said, on the contrary, you're going to do the greatest job of all. Today, you have to fight and deal with disease, pain, suffering, family, everything that comes with that. Then, because you have intimate knowledge of human anatomy and biology and chemistry and so on, you're going to teach us how the human being was created in the divine image, from a flesh we behold God. So you'll teach us the secrets of God, of the human body, of the human being, that only you know. Like astronomers will teach it through the cosmos. Everybody will show us the divine, and like cleaners will teach it through cleaners.
Will insurance cover
That
that?
will insurance cover that. So we do the greatest job of all. I have to tell you what happened. These were secular doctors, most of them. There were maybe 5 frum guys. They stood up, mamish, with a standing ovation on that. It so resonated with them. Why? Because I put it in asis that relate to their business. The Aleph of Aluf Shalem, of Achdus Hashem, Echad, B'teich the Gela, B'teich the medicine. So I don't see any reason, anyone here, whether you're a doctor or a lawyer or a computer programmer or a creative director or whatever it is, in the work you're doing, why shouldn't we be able to find the Elakusha B'zeh? I mean, it's fascinating when you start studying physics. You look at technology, science. I mean, even the programming. I was thinking about it. I'm not a programmer, but I look at, machine language. Zeros and ones. Zeros and ones is igulim and yesher. An eagle is a 0 and a 1 is a line. So you see the language of God in everything. You just have to apply yourself. So if we can make this, infuse every industry in the world with this type of elikus, that means lo ye'esa kol ha'elam el dasas Hashem b'lvad. That's, I said, this is one of alts. I have no doubt this is doable. I'm not saying everybody has to do it this way. There are many, many ways to do it because, as I said also, acts of goodness and kindness, chesed, tzedakah, being a mensch, these are all gula-dika things also. Let's not forget that. Someone said to me, so what are you talking? It's a Sheva Mitzvah Zeinech. I said, well, if every Jew did Sheva Mitzvah Zeinech, we'd have Mashiach here already, you know that. We dismiss Sheva Mitzvah as 7 little mitzvah. They just happen to be, these say this of they're basically the Seres HaDibros without Kibbutz and Shabbos. Just in different asias. So let's not just dismiss it. These are also Gili Alakus. And that's some of my thoughts on this. L'chaim, l'chaim. I hear there's a bus going to the oil. Tafshin Yud Aleph, sorry. I wasn't sure. That's what I was saying. What's your number? Yeah. No. Maybe somebody wants to say something in addition to what I said.
So I think encouraging.
Okay.
But you're on the vote. Maybe you can share a few words also.
Okay, that's sent. One more thing I want to send.
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah, he's asked me about artificial intelligence, so I'm just sending him a link. Give me a second.
In other words, the question of Mashiach, what's the question?
The kids, maybe if you want to say, tell, David wants to hear.
Okay, I'll say a few things about it. Fine, 1 second. I have to listen to my own class to know what to say. 1 second.
Just play it. We'll think you're saying it.
Okay.
Or just let me position it right in front of the camera so
We're just gonna ask ChatGPT to tell you what you would say. So.
By the way, that's what AI is. You take the camera of you saying the thing, put it in front of the camera, and finish.
Oh, you ask AI now, what do you think? What Jacobson would say.
Right.
You got it? I'll send you one more. 1 second.
Is there a recording of what you said?
I have to look. I'm not sure. But maybe. I have okay, here we go. Send it to Understand? L'chaim. So the question can be phrased like this: if AI, if artificial intelligence gets developed enough, can it become a virtual Rebbe? What do you think? Most of us would not like the idea, right? So
Inverse.
I'm not going to talk about it at length. I'll just say briefly the following. The truth is artificial intelligence is quite amazing. You can see ChatGPT or the other, what is Google's version called? Bard. Right. Quite, everyone's so fascinated by the results. But I think the real challenge that it allows us to think about is what is intelligence? Like someone said, can the robots ultimately outsmart us? And the answer is, if we're going to be robots, yes, these robots will be better robots than us. But if it allows us to discover another dimension of humanity that robots will never have, for example, the fact, what about emotional intelligence? I know very smart people out there that are emotionally imbeciles, idiots. What about the spiritual part of a person's life? So even though all human experiences...
emotionally opposed to intellectually.
Are you trying to prove my point? I'll explain in a moment. I didn't mean that in any... So like I said, spiritual aspirations. So it's true that you could essentially program every part of human experience, including intelligence, emotions, spirit, even godliness, into machines, and they will give us back that which we have inputted, even better than what we created in the first place. But I think if you learn Chassidus, you come to realize that something about intelligence that most people don't think of. People think intelligence is about being smart, knowing stuff, answering questions. The truth is, in the language of Chassidus, if you look in Perek Lamed Hey, in the Hagah, the Alter Rebbe writes, Shemaiti Memori. It's the only time he quotes the Maggid, his teacher. He says, I heard from my teacher. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Why only here he writes that? Because it's the theme. That Chochmah, which we know is the ultimate of intelligence, is Chochmah, the spark of an idea, conceiving of an idea. And Chochmah radiates Hu levade ve'ein zelose, that God alone and nothing else. Interesting statement. You'd think intelligence is about understanding things well. The smarter the person, the more he can analyze and evaluate and come up with innovations. There he says that actually wisdom, the ultimate wisdom, is experiencing a reality that's greater than yourself, experiencing a truth that's greater than yourself. Because the emotions are subjective. So when we think emotionally, we think in terms, what is in it for me? Do I like it? Don't I like it? It's subjective. It's basically based on self-interest. The mind was given to us as a gift, that we can travel to a place that's not about our self-interest, but like to know the truth of something that's beyond us. Like, for example, animals can be very smart, but they use their smartness to hunt, to breed, to find a mate, to outsmart other animals. You never see an animal sitting under a talus for 6 hours trying to connect to Elokus, because it's not their role. It's not their role. So just because we've outsmarted animals doesn't mean that we're using intelligence from Chassidus' point of view is a bridge between the conscious into the superconscious, into a realities that are higher than ourselves. I remember hearing from our Mashpir, Melech in Morristown, he said, what's the difference between Chochmah and Bina? He says, Bina is, I understand. Chochmah is the idea is understood. Or another way he put it was, that Bina, the mensch neemt the inyan, and the Chochmah, the inyan neemt the mensch. See the difference? You stand before, let's say, a beautiful painting, or you're listening to exquisite music. So I am appreciating the music, or the music is allowing me in and I get absorbed within it. See the difference? So one is called bittul. Chochmah has bittul. So it's not about me understanding, it's about me experiencing something beyond myself. Unfortunately, an arrogant person is going to use intelligence, so exact opposite of what intelligence should be. Intelligence should be taking him from arrogance to humility. It's like someone climbing a mountain and seeing the horizon and says, oh wow, I'm in awe of something beyond me. But arrogance in turn takes the intelligence and says, I'm smarter and therefore I'm going to win another award, make my ego bigger. Basically the intelligence is becoming another part of our emotional subjectivity, when in truth it's supposed to be the opposite. So frankly, I would say the following: if artificial intelligence, if we are going to behave with intelligence as more of ourselves, robots will outsmart us, they will be better. But if we're able to reach new levels of transcendence, the sky's the limit. Whatever you ever will program a machine will never be able to do that. And that is the challenge. So I think from my point of view, the AI is actually challenging us what does it mean to be human. If human is a brain, a machine, the machines will be better brains. Look, there was a time, if you remember, when chess first started, a few computer chess, they said no way that a computer will ever beat a human. And today it's a given. The best machines can beat the best chess players. Because it has enough data, has enough scenarios, and it's just going to be, its firepower is just simply bigger. But they even see today some chess masters will say, it can't be a machine because the machine they feel is doing something human. Like, a human being will do something that a machine will never do. Machines are predictable. But even the predictability of machines machines have learned to become unpredictable because they're using that part of the human as well. But that's still in the world of imagination. I don't know if I'm making sense to anybody here. Maybe I'm just speaking to you. I don't know.
Is it like a Mason, the Midas thing as opposed to Midas the Mason or something like that? Or what's
I don't know what you mean by Midas and Meichen. I mean, I spoke simple English.
In terms of transcending it not being an egotistical thing, how they're making you
Or like I said, a Tanya Perik Lamed. Chachma is koyach ma. Koyach ma. Chachma allows you into another reality that you would never be able to. Or what about the Chachma Stima? If you want to start using language, Chachma Stima. Now let me say something to you about emotional intelligence. Okay. Let's talk about marriage. Okay, that's a good place. If you have a disagreement with your wife, and you have proof that she's wrong and you're right, is that the way to go in a marriage? To go prove to her, like in a court of law, mathematically that you're right, and then she'll see logically you're right, and therefore she'll agree, and now we'll have shalom bayis. Why? So most men, especially smart men, think because women are stupid. It's not seichel that's going to work. You have to bring them flowers, be nice to them, patronize them. That's what many men think. Men that think that have no emotional intelligence. Because they think they're smarter, but you know what? I'm not going to show that I'm smarter. Emotional intelligence means life is not built on machines. It's not about proofs. Because computers can crunch numbers better than you can. If your wife wanted to marry you for a machine, she should marry a computer. Why should she marry you? A human being is not a brain alone. A human being is a whole experience. And unfortunately, a lot of people just don't have that emotional intelligence. Your child is coming and crying to you. So you can explain to the child, there's nothing to cry about. There's no monster in the closet. And not only that, you're going to prove it. You'll start bringing videos and so on and so forth. But this is an emotional experience. And it's about sensitivity, called empathy. On a tragic level, I'll give an example. One Rebbe, I don't think it was a Chabad Rebbe, told a guy that came to him who suffered a great loss, he said, I don't have answers for you, but I can cry with you. That's emotional intelligence. They talk about Mashiach and Geula. So the intellectual will go in to ask the questions like, what question? Are we still the seventh generation? And questions like that. An emotionally intelligent person will focus much more on, okay, what are we going to do about it? What's the experience? I mean, these are some examples. Now, can a machine be programmed like that? I'm sure that it can. I'm sure that you can create an android one day that will look just like a mother, that nurtures and cuddles and emotionally responds to her child. But I'd like to believe that there's a soul that you can never probably impart into a machine. So it's going to come down to whether we are going to access those souls. Mashiach comes, it's not just we're going to be smarter, we're going to be more godly, more divine, more transcendent. Second point I want to make is that at the end of the day, a machine, no matter how smart, is a tool. It's an instrument. Just because you have a smartphone, or you have a smart hammer, or a smart refrigerator, that's a tool for something. Will a machine ever be able to tell you the purpose of your life?
Yes.
I believe not.
It won't necessarily be right.
It will not be able to. It'll be able to take whatever is out there and give you a better version of it.
But
Only God can tell you the purpose of your life. And that's that. So it's going to come down to, I think, to really see, will the real humans rise? If humans are robots, then these robots will be better than we are. There's not a question in my mind. So the question is, what does it mean to be human? That's our challenge.
But godly meaning what? Meaning like the fisherman fishes for the Eibishter, the doctor heals for the Eibishter, etc., that sort of thing. That in other words, they might be doing that. The fisherman might still be a fisherman, but he's not fishing for whatever it is. He's fishing for something higher. He's fishing because his job, the Eibishter put him for, is to fish for other people, to have fish. Something like this, or what's the practical outcome of it?
Outcome of what?
In other words, what does it mean? This person is going to be more godly. A fisherman, so what? He's going to stop fishing. Or he's going to be just partially recognizes that even in his fishing, he's able.
We're talking about AI now. We're talking about.
No, we're talking about a
I gave the example of.
We're talking physical rednecks here.
No, I gave the example of a cleaners of medicine. What I'm not sure what you're asking me. Everything in life has what it is and what its deeper purposes, what's deeper transcendental level dimension. I'm not sure what your question is.
I'm not sure what my question is either. Don't worry about it.
Okay, fine.
But what I understood that because we have connection with God, it means that we have connection that machine cannot have this connection with God.
That doesn't mean they can't help us with our connection.
Yeah, but no, I agree with you. But the problem is that because we have connection, it means that we have connect to God's wise, God's knowledge. And machine, artificial intelligence doesn't have this connection.
Well, we can train it to have it. Why not? We can, whatever we know about God, we can put into the machine.
Yeah, no. Okay, but it depends on God. No, not on us. Of course, we could transport our knowledge to machine. Yes, it's right. I agree with you. But because person has connection directly with God, we cannot reconnect our connection with God to machine.
Okay.
Put a key in the net.
So much. What's the option? I sleep here. I have someone coming in the morning to take me.
Okay.
You can't go anywhere, right? Anyway, I'm going to say l'chaim to everybody. May each of us do our part before Gimmel Tammuz so we can be reunited with the Rebbe and the Gula Amitis Vashlema and find God in everything we do. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Quick question. You mentioned before, which I think is a very good point of that every person, for example, people think that you have to have an unbelievable amount of knowledge in every way, shape, or form, but a general yid has what to share with everybody to write whatever it is. At the same time, what's the platform that is? In other words, maybe it's kedai to have a sort of platform that's almost like open source, that any Jew can come, any one of the Hasidim can come and write their things. It makes it easier. The hardest part in speaking to a lot of people is gaining a small following that then does things like, for example, you have one guy who knows how to make YouTube shorts. So when you're speaking, he takes it and makes it into YouTube shorts, things like this. So gaining a small following that people who like the things you do is a big. Maybe it's kedai to have a platform like this where general Hasidim could almost like an open source sort of thing.
I see no reason why not.
Because it takes somebody who has a platform, the Chatchila, to facilitate it, maybe.
So what are you suggesting?
Suggesting maybe such a platform should be thought about, and that allows for people to share their thoughts and whatever it is, and
I agree. I agree. Okay, everybody. Call to and be well.
My name is Paolo. Do you mind putting down your email address? I won't live next to you. I'll send you one email.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No ink in here. Okay, there you go. I made record, by the way.
What's that?
I recorded it.
I don't know if that goes anywhere.
Yes, on your computer.
Sort of. Oh, fine. Okay, doesn't make it. It's on YouTube already, and it's on Facebook already also. Yeah, I'll send you the
So
links.
then it's this. Send me on.
You have an email, Bezalel, or something.
Yeah.
You have his contact information.
Yeah.
I'll send you the truth is like
Put it on your phone.
what it's at the Meaningful Life or something. What is it?
I'll give you my phone number. Send me a link to WhatsApp or email. You want? What do you prefer?
I can text you a link or whatever. You told me how you prefer. So,
Put my number.
Get to that game.
What's your name?
Remember my account.
Got some of that. Okay, I'm not pushing you. I'm just sharing the good one. Good one. What you said.
Yeah.
What I said to you.
I have you now.
That's something? It was a bit, yeah. That's that we did like what
Yeah, absolutely. If you have something to send me, I'll read it. But I have the link. I can send you this. Yeah. And in series, I get time. You can also, if you want, I can stuff like that. I saw the post of it.
Forget what you don't understand. Forget the abbreviations. It's a one time bet.
But I know other people. But they love that. They have I know somebody that likes that. Start teaching it. It's actually Spanish. Start teaching Spanish. Yes, people from one learning YouTube, one learning this, and they started doing it. But the hardest thing is from 0 to 1.
Okay, did you read that thing I sent you, that equal part? The body in the email, like 5 to slide.
No, I just got the email, but I skipped. I just
So the body in the email. From the time of that day.
Oh, maybe
And it had to do with that conversation we had. You were saying you eat healthy food to be healthy. So that thing is saying, anyway, take a look.
Они видят, что они неправы. Вместе с этим они продолжают подход, что они все равно считают, что надо изучать. Нет, потому что это приведет к миру, что это сам, знаете, вещи самое партийное. Понимаете? Вот такое.
איך לא ביקשת מכולם להישאר לעזור לך, תגיד לי?
למה? You know it's the hospitality industry? In the hospitality industry, זה כמו מלון וכאלה, כן?
אז ככה זה פה.
אז אף אחד לא רוצה להגיע, ואז אומרים לו, נו, עכשיו תנקה את החדר, אתה ישנת שם, אתה אכלת שם.
זה לא אותו דבר.
לא, זה אותו דבר, מתוועדות טוב, כן? זה מתוועדים. הולכים, לא צריכים לחשוב על זה ולנקות וזה, ומישהו מנקה מאחריהם, זה ככה זה ה... How are you, Rabbi Bosner? אבל חיים maybe, you need something anything? I bet. It's okay. Okay, well, wait 1 second. See, everything.
אני לא רוצה למשוך כי אחרי זה אני אעשה בלאגן.
Это понятно. Реальная история. Значит, ты его несешь, Ребята, я тебе покажу. Там такое это самое, как...
תגיד, היום בשמע על המיטה. מנדל.
מה זה?
You need to say תחנו בשמע על המיטה?
היום? למה לא?
כאילו היום לא היה תחנו כל היום.
בסדר, זה היה אתמול, עכשיו זה כבר במעריב, זה כבר יום של משתנה. Ну как, смотрите, руки у него есть, сделать миссис, есть, голова есть у читов, есть, нет, есть вот ноги, ну, просто чуть-чуть, да?
Вот здесь сама.
Чем тебе не стать, чем тебе не противно? Да, ой, такая что? Разница между ними, что они...
זה למשוך לשולחנות? מסדר את השולחנות גם?
כן, נסדר אותם כמו שם בבוקר. ושחרים. Ой, что так вот он. Там намного голова лучше, понимаете, все. Вот души нету, понимаете, чучело. אתה לא צריך לסדר. אתה לא צריך לסדר. לסדר, בגלל שאין להם, they don't approve.
אני אעזור עם מריו, שאתה רוצה להישאר איתך וזה תחזיר אותי
מה שיותר קל.
מה שיותר נוח עכשיו. עדיף שאני אעזור לך,
כך וכך, בין כך ובין כך. בוא משהו, בוא.
טוב, אני אעזור לדעת של זה, בסדר, אז מה זה להחזיר?
אני כן, יש לי... сердце его. זה הדבר הכי חשוב. הרבי צריך שאנחנו שנלמד חסידות, כן? אבל הרבי גם צריך שננקה אחרי ההתוודות. ללמוד חסידות, לא אגיד שכולם רוצים, אבל לנקות אחרי ההתוודות, אני אומר לך, זה ממש לא כולם רוצים. אבל זה בפרט זה מה שהרבי צריך. זה שלא כולם רוצים. זה בעצם אפשר באמת הזה,
לא ראיתי אותו.
בסדר.
מה זה, זעקתי אותו?
לא, בסדר. אפשר לשים עליו איזשהו, איך קוראים לזה?
הייתי גם לא תשים כלום, כי יש לו כזה...
הנה, אפשר לעשות ככה.
מי הכין את המרק? אתה הכנת את המרק? You made the soup?
כן.
וואו.
זה מה זה הסוף, זה מאוד פשוט. קוראים לזה חצי הוממייד. ומה זה חצי ביתי. מה עשיתי? לקחתי של מריה ומקושר, אתה יודע. אבל יש בו את הכל, כאילו, את כל לא יודע מה, קוראים לזה, הגרעינים האלו וזה, כן, מה שיש בו וזה. אבל הטעם זה כזה, זה לא מעניין. אז אני עושה את זה כאילו לבסיס, ואז אני שם כל מיני תבלינים וזה, לעשות את זה יותר כזה,
יותר אינטרסטינג.
זה כזה דרך מהר כזה, אבל אפשר לעשות...
ואחיך, כמה, יש לך, אחיך שהגיע לפה, כמה ילדים יש לו? אחיך מגרונאייט, שהגיע פה עם הילד שלו, וכמה ילדים יש לו?
אחי מגרונאייט יש לו 3 בנים יש לו.
הוא קטן ממך, נכון?
וכל אחד מן הבנים יותר גדול מהשני.
כן, ראיתי,
כן, הראשון הוא ככה, השני הוא ככה, השלישי הוא ממש כזה. סתם כזה.
גם הוא לא קטן, אחיך.
אחי גם לא קטן, נכון? לא, אבל זה לא נכס שהמשפחה שלנו הזה.
כן?
אחי הוא לא כמוני, אין לו כאלו גדול כמוך. הוא כזה, יש לו כזה, אבל אין לו כזה. זה מעניינים אחר.
יש עוד, לא יודע, תגיד, זה יקר מקום? זה לא נורא. לא? לא כמו סיגריה?
לא, בכלל לא כמו סיגריה.
אני אקנה לעצמי. אני אוהב, במהלך היום אני צריך לחכות ככה. באמזון מתקונים, לא?
באמזון, לא יודע, מה זה? לא נקרא את זה יש פה, את ה-GWC, משהו כזה. אוקיי, זה נראה לי הכל בסדר.
כן, נקי, יותר נקי מכל.
זה היה ממש פחות נקי מכל. כן, וגם אני והירש חברים.
מי זה הירש? אני לא מכיר.
הירש, אבא שלו.
כן, כן, הירש מדבר.
כן, הוא כזה, כן. אבל כן, אני עם ינקי מאוד חברים, כן. אבל בעצם ינקי, ינקי הוא לא בדיוק, הוא יותר גדול מהגיל של הילדים שלי, אבל גם פחות ממני. מה זה? כל זה צריכים לעשות בעוד בקורסה אחרת, בגלל שזה...
גם שמולי דיברתי איתו בחור מאוד קרוב.
דלין?
כן,
כן, אני אומר לך, כל הדלינים הם בכלל, הם כן. כן, יש כאלו שיותר חרדים ופחות, אבל אחד בני אדם, ממש בני אדם. הם כאלו אנשים טובים, אחד. Hey Moise, how's it going? Thank God. Sorry, I didn't hear you. I was just in the middle of a cleanup. What's that?
You're still recording.
I'm still recording?
Yes, I didn't hear that.
I shouldn't be still recording now. Let me see. Oh, that's weird. I was still recording. Oh, that's odd. That's really odd. It's funny. I stopped recording and I stopped the whole thing. But you never know. Computer, speaking about AI. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Okay.